Wanting to read something just to suffer may not be the most appealing of proposals, but that's the main charm of the Utsuge genre. Sometimes that sort of emotional impact can be the recipe for unforgettable experiences due to the characters facing and overcoming extreme hardships and tribulations. In that regard, medical circumstances present a suitable basis for exploring realistic struggles, as well as delivering heart-wrenching stories. Not so long ago, I made a review of Flutter of Birds, another visual novel with illnesses as the focal point of its story. But that game wouldn't prepare me mentally for what I was about to experience with today's visual novel. Hey there, this is Marin, and this is my review of Konata Yori, Kanata Mahdi.
Story.
The story revolves around Kanata, a high school student who is trying to lead a normal life despite having lost both of his parents. However, things take a dire turn when he is diagnosed with terminal cancer and is told he only has a handful of months left to live. Without anyone to rely on except his two close friends, he decides to tell them about his illness. But he has a change of mind when facing his friend Sakura, the girl who helped him pull through all the hardships he faced up until now. He fears that if she were to know the truth about his medical condition, she would forever lose her ability to smile and laugh. As such, to avoid her sorrow, he decides to hide his imminent fate from her. While this is proving far more difficult than he anticipated, an unexpected happening is about to change his ephemeral life when a young blonde-haired vampire suddenly appears in his house. The two of them quickly bond, and Kanata eventually tells the wandering vampire his secret, precisely because the two of them are complete strangers, and takes her in, offering her shelter in his up-to-now empty-feeling house. Cancer is a very delicate topic to depict in both visual novels and any other form of media due to the severity of its implications. In fact, when it comes to VNs, it's far more common to just elude specifying what illness a character has and opt instead for an unnamed one. Konata Yori Kanata, Made, however, doesn't shy away from being brutally detailed in its portrayal. There are some scenes that can be straight up uncomfortable to read, and I won't deny that I had to take a small break after reading one of them in particular. This is a title whose writing accurately conveys the sense of hopelessness cancer imposes on one's life. And for that reason, I think this is a story that will certainly not be for everyone. Having said that, I also consider this to be the strongest aspect of the narrative. The game often delves deeply into the philosophy of life and death. The protagonist is highly conscious of his health state and often reflects on his own actions and behavior within his personal circumstances. Overall, it's a game with strong messaging. Although personally, I would say rather than focusing on death, the true theme of the story is about facing your own destiny, be it death, loneliness, the retribution of your sins, or even the nature of your own existence. You can sense how the narrative captures these ideas right from the very beginning, when the game speaks of the dilemma of living the way one wishes to, and the difficulties such a way of life implies due to the ties of obligation imposed by societal norms. This idea is applied in the story with how the protagonist approaches each heroine, being especially evident with his relationship with his childhood friend, Sakura Kanai. The relationship between the two is slightly complicated. Kanata is well aware of Sakura's feelings, as she previously confessed to him in a roundabout yet clear enough manner. But it's exactly for this motive that Kanata lost the chance to tell her about his illness, leaving him in a difficult predicament. Fearing that openly rejecting her due to his medical circumstances would traumatize her, he instead decides to push her into a relationship with Kusukue, his other childhood friend, while also disregarding and acting cold towards her. This all leads to a very painful route that's honestly hard to read. I'm not saying it was bad. In fact, I would even say it was one of my favorite routes of the whole game. But the cruelty of some of its scenes was honestly soul-crushing. I feel this could have led to a disastrous route in terms of quality, but it's here where the quality of the writing and the messaging turns it around, since all of his actions feel at least somewhat justified. However, something that I found odd was that, despite presenting this entire dilemma early on as one of the main topics of the story, once you entered another girl's route, Sakura lost nearly all her presence in the narrative. On the other hand, Chris, the lodger vampire, was very clearly presented as the main canonical girl. Her immortality is an important part of her route, probably more so than her vampirical nature. I quite like the chemistry the two of them showed at first. She had a playful and mischievous personality that worked really well at giving some much-needed cheerfulness to the nihilistic mood of the narrative. That being said, I felt like midway through her route, her personality changed into a more docile and sweeter one, which I don't think the game gave enough time to flesh out this character development and, as a result, felt a bit too abrupt. Just like Chris, Hatai is the other character whose side of the story has some fantastical elements to it. She is at first very distant, but once Kanata crosses paths with her during the night, when he sees her fighting mysterious beasts, she starts to very slowly open up. And I know what some of you might already be thinking. A blonde-haired vampire? A protagonist with an illness? A classmate who secretly fights monsters during the night? Where have I heard this before? I'm aware this whole thing might have sounded like a spoiler, but in reality, it isn't. That's because the fantasy side of the story is extremely underdeveloped. You could probably remove it entirely, and barely anything would change. For this reason, I felt like her route was on the weaker side. Lastly, we also have the Izumi and Yu route. This is a dual route that focuses on Yu, a sick kid who shared a hospital room with Kanata, and Izumi, the nurse who took care of both of them. This route is mostly told as a backstory for Yu's character growth. While I found her development to be well done, having the story told through flashbacks gave it a bit of an intermittent feeling. Although, if you leave this one for last, you could circumvent this. Still, as a whole, it was a good route, I would say. One aspect that affects all the routes is the brevity of the game. While technically not a short game, it certainly feels like one at times. As I previously mentioned, the subplot regarding Hade hunting mysterious monsters felt almost unnecessary due to how little screen time it received. I think a properly elaborated fantasy subplot, alongside some more in-depth character development arcs, could have gone a long way in elevating this title as an absolute classic. On the flip side, the short length also meant that there wasn't that much that could be considered filler, making it a generally breezy read. Another reason why the writing was quite enjoyable was the prose itself. Personally, I found it to have a comfortable flow, striking a good balance between dialogue and descriptive text, the latter being elegant, precise, but also rich with thoughtful implications. The option of switching between horizontal and vertical-oriented text was a nice touch that, in my opinion, helped further sell the impression of reading an actual novel. I kind of wish more visual novels allowed you to read the text vertically, but that's just a personal take.
演出
As far as the presentation is concerned, I think it looks good enough, although it's quite basic in terms of visual effects and such. I wouldn't say that there's anything that stands out in particular, but the sprites have a nice softness to them that I liked. The CGs also look good, but there are very few of them, maybe around 6 for each girl, and a little bit more for Chris, since she's the main girl. The music, however, is really good and still holds up remarkably well, especially the sadder tracks, which do a really good job at conveying the melancholy that the protagonist is shouldering. I do have one nitpick with it, which is that the tracks change way too often. This was especially notable during the slice-of-life scenes, where every time there was anything resembling a joke or an awkward situation, it immediately swapped to the dumb comedy track, almost magnetically so. I sometimes wonder if there are people out there who actually like that type of track.
まとめ
In conclusion, recommending Konata Yori, Kanata Mahde is a complex matter. If you are looking for a game with a strong and intricate narrative, this absolutely isn't it. It often feels like the game is forgetting major plot points, only to fetch them back when it's convenient for the narrative. But that's not the reason why you should read this title. Where this VN truly excels is at presenting a unique and despairing point of view, one that permeates deep into the game's philosophy and themes. This is the type of visual novel you read above all for the thought material. It's often uncomfortable, painful, and straight up unpleasant, but that's also what makes it so memorable. I give Konata Yori, Kanata Mahde, an 8 out of 10. And that's going to be it for the review. As I said, I really don't think this is a VN for everyone. If you look at the VNDB rating, It's actually relatively low, and I can totally understand why. My honest recommendation would be to just read the first 5 minutes of the game. I personally think that's enough time to know if this is something you would want to read or not, since the introductory monologue is like a capsule of what makes this game interesting. Anyway, as always, thanks for listening. Miran out.